minutes. Excellent. All right. So we'll give it a couple more minutes just to see if we get a few more people, and then we'll do a quick introduction. Okay. Good afternoon. Hello, everyone. My name is Emily, and on behalf of VIA Sport British Columbia, welcome to this learning lab focused on mental health in the sporting environment. VIA Sport is an independent, nonprofit agency that aims to grow participation in amateur sports system by stewarding the province's investment in sport. We support the sector to increase access to safe, inclusive, and meaningful sport experiences for all, and provide education and development opportunities to strengthen our community. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that while you are all joining us from communities and regions across the province, VIA Sport is hosting this session on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. VIA Sport is honored to ground this work on these territories as we strive to increase access to sport and play for all British Columbians. Today, we are here to examine the mental health landscape in sport and are fortunate enough to have Dr. Shaunna Taylor, PhD, past chair of the Canadian Sports Psychology Association and certified clinical counselor, here to facilitate this session. Shaunna will also be joined by Dr. Stu Gershman, a sport medicine physician and founder of Buddy Check Regessi, and Lindsay Goulet, a mental health advocate with a PhD in exercise physiology. Dr. Stu and Lindsay will provide some case studies and share information about the Buddy Check organization. The next 60 to 90 minutes will aim to cover foundations of mental health and wellness, leadership and change making in BC, stories from the field, resources, action planning, and next steps. A short amount of time at the end of the presentation has been allotted for questions at the end of this session. The chat box will open and you will be invited to enter your questions. Only the host will be able to see the questions, and we will aim to answer the common themes or questions. All microphones have been muted for the duration of this presentation, and the closed captioning function has been included. This session is being recorded with the intention of sharing it on our Learning Center with VIA Sport. So without further ado, I will pass it off to Dr. Shaunna Taylor.
Thank you so much, Emily. Really excited to be here and to be joined by Buddy Check today. Really thrilled that we're having this conversation in BC as a collective with our VIA Sport BC Alliance. I know I recognize some of the names. There's been a tremendous outpouring of interest and connection with those of us that work in the mental health field, especially over the past year with the pandemic. I think it has really brought this issue to the forefront for everyone. So not just in our sector, which is the one bright shining light in what has been a very challenging year for everyone. As Emily was saying in her introduction, I'm going to go a little bit into detail here about our purpose. So wanting to add to the mental health literacy. So what's some of the common glossary of words and phrases and actions and practice that we should become more familiar with in the sports sector? What can you do as a key influencer? That's the phrase that I use to describe parents, trainers, sport administrators, leaders in the field, and of course, coaches. So what can you do? Where are some places we can start? And then, of course, Buddy Check steps in on the stories from the field. So what are folks doing out there in the sport community to make a difference in this mental health literacy space? And then lastly, give you a bit of a springboard and a jumping point on where you might want to turn next. If you're here representing your provincial sport organization, maybe you're representing your family, maybe you're representing your local sport or a club. What are some of the things that you can do moving forward? So some of the areas that we're hoping to cover today. already done an introduction, so not going to go into a ton of detail, but my core affiliations that I proudly represent today are the Pacific Sport Okanagan, where I serve as the executive director and faculty member at UBC Vancouver, where I teach in the kinesiology department, as well as my professional association, the Canadian Sports Psychology Association. As Emily mentioned earlier, on the traditional territory where she is located, I have the privilege of being in the Okanagan on the unceded traditional territory of the Syilx Nation, and my pronouns are she and her. So I'm going to start out with some of those definitions that I alluded to earlier to help strengthen that literacy and see if we can get that conversation started. Talk a little bit more about the role of the sports sector, and in particular, the key influencers who are in it and where we might want to move for the future. Then I'm going to hand the reins over to Stu and Lindsay, and they're going to let us know all about Buddy Check. And we're going to wrap things up with being mindful of some of the questions that may be entered in the chat box, and anything else we can't get to today, we've discussed with Emily, and we want to make sure that we leave the door open for you to contact us through either directly or through Via Sports, so that we can keep the conversation going, because we know we're not going to get to everything that everyone needs today in one session. So where we're going to start is really on this notion of duty of care, and how we owe that duty of care and that quality sport environment to athletes, coaches, and everyone that works in it. So we need to think about, if we're going to offer that duty of care, then we need to figure out what we can do as sport leaders to improve those mental health outcomes. What can we do to improve things like awareness, global wellness indicators, the type of environment that acts as both a preventative measure, but also very much a part of everyday self-care for athletes and coaches, and how sport culture actually affects mental health. How much do we really know in our context of sport, in this sector that we are also passionate about? How much do we know about mental health? And so to start, I'm going to actually begin with a little quiz. And you can just do this on your own as we go through and just reflect on what you think the answers might be. So first question: sport enhances mental skills and provides resiliency to life stressors. So think about the answer to that. And so it's not a really cut and dry answer to this one, sometimes. So it can also, in addition to, yes, being very true, it often can enhance mental skills and resiliency, but it can also promote maladaptive behaviors that take away from those healthy coping skills. So athletes or coaches experiencing mental health challenges, are they more likely to seek help? And the research shows us that they aren't. The literature internationally shows that to date, athletes and coaches are less likely to seek help than the general population. And in large part, we attribute this to the stigma that is still there in help seeking. Some sport cultures see a higher incidence of mental illnesses and mental health challenges. True. So there are some categories in particular sport cultures that statistically increase an athlete's risk or a coach's risk of developing a mental illness or mental health challenge. So some things we need to be aware of. And then last question: sport leaders, so wherever you fit in attending here today, should be trained on ways to spot mental health challenges. True. And really see it as another way of caring for that holistic health and welfare. So the same way that we care for physical symptoms of injury or illness. And that's why we're all here today, is really start talking about this. So again, back on the literacy piece, what is mental health? So a lot of times people lump together mental health and mental illness. They're related, but they're actually distinct concepts. So someone might have a mental illness, but they might still be maintaining positive mental health outcomes, or a person may not have a mental illness or be experiencing symptoms of a mental illness, but still be experiencing poor mental health. And so if you go on the Canadian Mental Health Agency websites and many mental health websites across Canada and abroad, you'll see a continuum that looks something like this, where you've got positive mental health on the top and poor mental health on the bottom. And on the other axis, you'll have no symptoms of a mental health condition and symptoms on the other side. And so you'll see, you might have someone who's situated here where they've got symptoms of a mental health condition, but they're also managing very positive mental health because they are getting the supports that they need in order to maintain that positive mental health. You'll also see some folks will also not have any symptoms and they're maintaining positive mental health, and they might fluctuate back and forth between those two. Or you've got someone down here who might be exhibiting symptoms of a mental health condition, and that unfortunately hasn't been addressed, or for whatever reason, those needs and assistance isn't being met. And they will be in what we would classify as poor mental health. And over here, when we do have some of the assistance and the supports and start moving in the other direction, you've got someone who might still have poor mental health, but no symptoms of a mental health condition. So it can be very misleading. It's not always, we're not able to see it always with the naked eye, whether someone is experiencing poor or positive mental health, just based on the visibility of their symptoms necessarily. So it can be a bit of a confusing scenario, and something that I think we need to start talking about and bring in common conversation when we're in the locker room or when we're on the field of play, of just what mental health looks like. And it's going to look really different for everyone. Another thing to start thinking about, and some words to start using and adding to your lexicon, might be the idea of mental health assets. And so these tend to be both falling into two broader categories of internal and external mechanisms that we can use to maintain those positive mental health outcomes and overall sense of well-being. So some of those might be internal, and these we would call our tools. Those could be things like self-regulation, or the way that we personally cope with things like stress. And then we've got external mental health assets. So that might be a particular individual. It might be a support system. It might be compassionate leadership, and something that maybe you have in place in your sport organization to help assist that athlete or that coach, of course. So just something to add to your mental health toolkit, or literacy of the mental health assets. At the Canadian Centre for Mental Health and Sport, where I'm a practitioner, we have been conducting research and collaborating with international agencies all the world over, doing the same kind of research. And we've been servicing Canada's high performance sports system and the athletes in that and coaches in that system. And our calls for support over the last year since the pandemic have been up 300%. So we know that this conversation and the stress is high. And in the broader sport community, outside of high performance sport, we know that the role of mental health in everyday conversation, or the topic, has been coming up more and more in grassroots and all the way through development sport, because we're seeing struggling at every level. And it's becoming the one plus side of a very challenging situation is it's brought it to light that it's really top of mind for everyone. And other studies being done by the International Olympic Committee in collaboration with other national sport federations or international sport federations are that mental health is the biggest challenge faced during the COVID-19 pandemic. Another piece of the literacy is to talk about this issue of well-being, or this phrase called well-being, and what it really means. And so it is multidimensional and multifaceted. One way, in some of the mental health literature and research, they divide it into 4 distinct categories. Others, it's divided into 5 or more. But for the sake of today's webinar, let's use the one that they use at the Coaching Association of Canada's brand new mental health module that they're offering for free online, that you can take even tonight if you wanted to. It's set up, it's live, it's ready to go, and it just got launched last week. Divided into physical, psychological, emotional, and then one that's all encompassing in the social, cultural, and spiritual side. A strategy has been developed by the high performance sport community. And that's another exciting thing that will be coming and will be released this spring or summer. And these are 5 different pillars or elements on which the strategy will be based. So you can see here, starting, and there's no particular starting point and there's no particular end point here, but there are 5 in a cycle of importance acting as pillars to the strategy. So we've got things like leadership and stakeholder engagement, communication. How do we promote this notion of mental health? How do we work on some prevention mechanisms and some ways to treat some of these challenges? How do we do a better job of assessment and recovery and that actual, so the nuts and bolts of the support system in sport? And then the implementation of this strategy or plan, how do we monitor it? And then how do we improve it and make sure that we're moving forward in a responsible way? So these are some of the core elements and pillars of that strategy. And so keep your eyes peeled on that in our media and through the sport institutes and through Via Sport. That will be disseminated all across Canada in the weeks to come. We talk about that idea of well-being and a holistic model. Another way that it's already been adopted and you can take more education is if you take the Aboriginal coaching module, you will be introduced to the Indigenous sport community's concept of the holistic model. And this model moves beyond sport well into Indigenous healthcare as well, and the decolonizing of healthcare in this beautiful model depicted on this slide here. So our partners at the Indigenous Sport and Recreation Council in British Columbia have it slightly modified. You'll see a lot of the same themes, but they're just grouped in a different way. So you've got physical, spiritual, cultural, and mental in this particular model. And when we're working in mental health care and we're working with trying to build that resiliency and getting those conversations going with our Indigenous sport community, getting the athletes and coaches to figure out what their mental health assets are, internal and external support systems, and things that we can be talking about and using and relying on in each of these areas. So this is a sample of one of the worksheets that we used. So if we're going to talk about mental health, we need to talk about and really understanding what the needs are of the people that we care about. So whether that's someone within our family, a teammate, a colleague who's struggling, do we start by asking these questions to figure out where they are in those quadrants of the model that I showed you earlier from the Canadian Mental Health Association? And do they need comfort at this time? Do they need some solutions? Do they need someone to listen? What's the starting point? The starting point is communication. And this is what Buddy Check's going to be talking about in a few moments when I hand the floor over to them. How you get this conversation started, right? So whether it's that teammate sitting next to you on the bench or in the locker room, or whether it's your colleague if you're a coach and it's the assistant coach, right? So maybe we start with asking some of these questions. We try to be more aware and figure out what questions to ask. We can also start thinking about, and this can start today, think about what are our mental health assets that we have. So whether it's personally or as a team culture, or maybe as a broader program, or even broader still, as a provincial sport organization. So how do we enhance that self-awareness in our staff and in our athletes? How do we check in? So what does that look like? What are the type of resources that we have? Do we have a referral network? Do we have some kind of system? Maybe it's down the pipeline of the clubs all the way up to the PSO, all the way up to the NSO, or maybe it's a multi-sport approach. We've got other sports that we work really closely with. Maybe we share the network with them. And then do we have some of those real nitty-gritty tools that the coaches might even integrate into some of those technical skills and all of their strategic expertise and the sport-specific stuff? Do we have some self-care tools that we're also starting to infuse into our sport culture as well? Because it isn't just about putting a puck in a net or a ball in a hoop, right? It's about building their hearts, building their minds, building their connections, building great, resilient people, right? So, what do these mental health assets look like? And could we start building that toolkit for ourselves? On that same note of the idea of tools, and I'm going to give you some websites at the end. That's sort of how we're going to wrap up today. Um, some websites where there have been tools already provided and disseminated over the course of the pandemic. So some of them are very relevant to what we're all experiencing right now, which is an extraordinary time in the history of sport in our lifetime. This is an example from the Canadian Centre for Mental Health in Sport. It's a check-in tool. It's a self-awareness tool for competitive athletes to figure out what zone they're in. You know, if they're in their comfort zone, kind of green light, all systems go. Are they in that challenge zone where they're easily frustrated, trouble focusing, need a lot of breaks? They're not talking much. They're kind of on the cusp of things aren't going well. Or are they in the stop zone? So they might be in crisis. They're having difficulty coping. Here's where we know that that athlete might need some external support. So step number one, giving them that sense of self-awareness, letting them know we care, and start using some of these tools more regularly, the way that we would use a warm-up or a stretching regimen or any other way that we prep physically in sport, right? We just start adding new dimensions. Again, holistic model, right? And then what do we do? I know a lot of coaches over the past year and leaders and parents have said to me, this awareness is great, but I'm just not sure when that conversation starts, what to do. You know, if I started, I'm not sure that I'm confident. And this is the beauty of programs like Buddy Check, is understanding we don't all have to be, I'm gonna let them go into this more, but we don't all have to be mental health practitioners here. We just need to care. We need to care and be that sounding board and actively listen, ask questions to fully understand, reassure them, and normalize, but don't minimize. And then, yeah, we do want to get into some form of triage, depending on what it is that they're disclosing and figuring out what those connections are. And this is where a sector is at right now, is figuring out, okay, how are we going to build in some of those internal mechanisms so we can all feel confident to create that caring community. So when that person's opens up, I know what to do. But we know that they don't open up a lot of times. Okay, they don't open up because there are some of the barriers to sharing are here. Yeah, I know in high performance sport, when I have the absolute privilege of hearing stories firsthand in my practice, often fear of losing their position or their status, right? Maybe they've had a bad experience in the past seeking support. They sought help, they talked about it, and they were either shunned or they were ridiculed or it wasn't taken seriously. The emphasis in sport using language like being mentally tough versus perhaps changing that language to mental flexibility. So it isn't about being just mentally tough, this stoic, almost militaristic terms that we use in sport. It's okay to be tough, absolutely. But remember that young person or person of all ages might internalize that the opposite of mentally tough is mentally weak. So if we use a word like flexibility, that helps change some of that conversation to, yeah, we're going to work on our mental flexibility versus just the toughness, right? The perceived stigma is another reason. Coaches or community leaders who might even have an active part in increasing that stigma, whether it's through the language that they use or their actions, or maybe they're just simply a lack of peers and visibility on others who have spoken out in that particular sport culture. So we know that you being here, first of all, is just amazing because it means you care. It means you're curious. It means maybe you're even ready to be one of these change makers. So this idea of being an influencer, whatever role you play right now when you're listening to this, we know that these are some places that you can start. So we can start changing that mental health literacy language. We can start using words like flexibility. We can start familiarizing ourselves with mental health assets, with mental illness and where it fits with mental health, that you can have a mental illness and you can still have experience positive mental health. So all that literacy, we can develop check-in systems. with ourselves as leaders, because you've got to take care of yourself first if you're going to be anything useful to anyone else, right? So figuring out how to do that self-care if you are a leader yourself. And then, of course, that leads you right into positive role modeling. So the self-care, showing your own humanity, giving your own examples, sharing your own story, being brave and doing that is literally going to change the life of, and it's going to change the culture of sport around us if we start talking. And then lastly, figure out who could be that community of care around me that might extend out beyond all my sport specific buddies. Who are some of the professionals or some of the elders, some of the trusted community members that I know can be part of that broader referral system. So changing the culture really starts with you. And many athletes too, and I don't know if we've got any athletes in the webinar with us today, but we know that the leadership likely is where this is going to start. We know that it has been changing from the grassroots up as well. Many athletes have been very outspoken, and that is fantastic. But in amateur sport and grassroots sport, the locus of power and control lies with the parents and the coaches and the leaders and the administrators. So if you change the language around mental health and move away from thinking, I can handle it, and I'm going to model this model of stoicism, to I'm going to ask for help when I need it. That modeling, sharing, modeling help, seeking. And I know with talking with all my colleagues in mental health and healthcare today, caring people and caring sport programs, caring health system programs work through issues with other people. They don't do it alone. So this is something in competitive sport culture, the help-seeking piece that we know needs to change. And I think we are very receptive more than ever in human history to change. And honestly, the pandemic is playing a part in that, because it's really brought it front and center as an issue that we all need to work on every single day to be a caring culture. So that leads me to the exciting conversation about change making and how we change culture, and how some people have decided in our province and beyond that they want to make a difference. They've taken a look and gotten creative and used that sense of care and understanding to be change makers. And so it is with my great pleasure that I introduce Stu and Lindsay, and I'm going to hand over the reins to Lindsay actually, and they're going to tell us all about their stories from the field in the Buddy Check for Jesse program. So welcome, and I've stopped sharing.
Thank you.
Go for it, Lindsay.
I'm gonna. Okay. Stu, you have to unmute yourself. Oh boy.
Wonder if I can unmute him, or can I not?
You can. I asked him to unmute. Maybe he'll. There.
Yeah,
There he goes.
And my screen shows everybody who's participating.
Yeah, and I'm going to share my screen now, and we'll get your presentation up. Here we go. Maybe. There you go. Stu, do you see it?
Yep.
Okay, good. Take it away, friend. Stop muting yourself.
All right.
You're
Hear me?
back. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. Medicine is way easier than this stuff. Thanks. I would like to thank you for the opportunity and the great privilege to be able to speak to everybody today. It's hard for me to believe that we're able to do this, and that Lindsay and I are going to be here sharing Buddy Check with you. This started as a simple idea, and obviously has grown. And for myself, it's humbling and probably the greatest honor of my life to be able to turn my my son's suicide into a positive legacy for himself and my family and for others. And many people have had a hand in this journey, and two of them you're going to meet today. One you've already met, and you can see how much she helps me, Lindsay, and you'll hear more from her in a little bit. Hoping today that we're going to peel back some of the complexities of mental health and the array of resources out there to something that can be very simple, that all of us can do as youth leaders and coaches, so that we can actually have an enormous impact on youth through the power of sport. And the best part about all of this is you do not need to be a mental health professional to do this. You do not need to be a physician. You do not need to at all. All you need is your voice as a coach or a youth leader, some logistical support, as you can see, and some easy downloadable resources from our website and wherever else you might get them. And by the way, I did the Coaching Association of Canada free online course last week when it came out, and I think it's a great course. And it is really helpful so that you can gain confidence in some of the languaging around mental health, learn a little bit about yourself, and all of that is going to help you just feel more confident as a youth leader and as a coach and being able to help others. And as per protocol, we have disclosures up here. Yes, we are a grassroots society. We'll talk a little bit about our origins in a while. Charity status is pending. We have a true passion for raising awareness of mental health and sport, and with all the positive feedback that we have received over the past 3 years, it has helped us with increasing that passion. We are associated with the BC Amateur Sports Fund for donations at this time until we become a full-fledged charity, and we do not have any financial involvement with Via Sport. Who am I? Primarily a dad, a volunteer coach. I'm with the Greater Victoria Minor Ball Hockey Association on the executive. I work as a sports medicine physician. I work with some teams, and I'm a true believer that our youth can change the world. And our Buddy Check program has received a number of awards, and the recognition is phenomenal, and we appreciate it. And the best part is it's allowed us to expand our reach and amplify the message and reach more people. And that's the best part about any of that recognition. The next slide, I believe, is going to be.
It's about me.
Yeah,
Oops.
and I just want to say that Lindsay and her family have been a gift to my family and to Buddy Check for Jesse.
Thanks, Dale. So my name is Lindsay, and that's my kid Owen over there, and I'm going to talk about him forever and always, but in this presentation, this is all about him and all for him, and Jesse, of course. So I run Buddy Check's social media, and I'll talk about how I got involved with Buddy Check when I do our little case study. I go to schools and I give talks to anywhere from grade 4 all the way up into high school that talk about the difference between mental health and mental illness. I really like to make sure that kids understand the difference and how to support each other. And then I really do anything I can possibly do to talk about mental illness and mental health and all of the things that do with youth mental illness that I can possibly do. So if you need anything, please let me know, because I'll talk your ear off. I am also, first and foremost, a mom to 2 kids, one with 4 mental illnesses. I do have a PhD in exercise physiology. I love being a support warrior for my son and my husband. And I also am a true believer that education and awareness can help the youth change the world, because they're, like Stu said, they're the ones that are going to do this for us. So we get to be the kind of kick them in the butt and let's talk about it. But I do believe that our youth are the change makers. So Stu, the next slide is the video. So everybody, just so you know, this is just a video that explains what Buddy Check is. So if you don't know what Buddy Check for Jesse is, this video will help you. So I'm going to click to the next slide and it's going to play for you. Hopefully. God, I hope. Here we go. Can you hear it? Sorry. How's that? We'll try again.
Buddy Check for Jesse is an initiative that my family started in response to the suicide of my oldest son. Jesse was 22 years old, and on October 29th, 2014, he took his life. And in the wake of that tragedy, the hockey community was incredibly supportive to my family, myself, and there was a lot of green tape going around, which is the color of mental health. That's why you guys are using the green tape. And it became a very supportive environment. And I've always felt as a coach, and I know Andy feels like this, and I know Jeff feels like this, and hopefully every coach you've ever had, we have a big responsibility to you guys. And that responsibility is to teach you more than the game, to teach you about life and supporting each other. From this tragedy and realizing the responsibility that I have as a coach, and you guys being youth, which are the future, Buddy Check for Jesse was started. And the whole idea behind it is you guys are the generation that are going to change things. For me, it's giving back and thanking you guys for the support we've had through hockey, but also asking for your help. Really need you guys' help. Not for me, but for yourselves. You guys are a team. You guys have loads of friends, family, and if you haven't been exposed to anybody going through a mental health challenge, a mental health illness, really hard time in their life yet, 100% of us in our lifetime will go through it. It doesn't matter if you're the best stick handler, the best body checker, or the best setup guy in the power play. Anybody is susceptible to mental health challenges. And unfortunately, there's an incredible stigma still around talking about feelings, approaching somebody and asking them how they're feeling, being fearful to do it. And there shouldn't be. There really shouldn't be any stigma. And you guys are the generation that's going to change that, because you guys are the generation that can change a lot of things. Because we have not done the greatest job at this point in time to make that something that is not a stigma. That's something that is just normal conversation. You guys should be the generation that is going to take the stigma away from mental health. And as time goes on and you get older, checking on each other, seeing how somebody's doing. There's nothing wrong with that. You would do it if they sprained their ankle or they were limping in the dressing room. You can do it anytime to see how somebody's feeling. And I'm not even talking about mental illness. I'm just talking about people going through stuff. It's incredibly common at your age. You're all got a lot of stuff going on in your heads, okay? It's okay to check on each other. Be the generation that feels comfortable reaching out for help. That would be amazing. That's what I'm asking of you guys. It's not just today, it's all the time. It's all the time, guys, okay? The green tape is to remind us of mental health challenges. Don't ever judge what you can't see. You never know what somebody else could be going through. And if you're that person going through it, you do not want to be the one who gets judged. You do not want to be the one who gets embarrassed in some way. You want to feel supported.
All right.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Hey, no problem. That always makes Stu a little teary.
Yeah. So you get a good idea of what we're about, and it's not that complicated. The key points about Buddy Check for Jesse are: it's an opportunity, like I've mentioned, it's an opportunity for youth leaders at all levels to have a significant and lifelong mental health impact. You do not need to be a mental health professional. And actually, it's really quite simple and easy to do. It doesn't have to be complicated, and we'll get into that a little bit. Next slide. Mission statement. This is how things have to be worded to get charity status with CRA. So it's not exactly our wording, which you'll see, but you can all read that. And next slide. Further information about what we do. Next slide. But really, Buddy Check is to honor the memory of Jesse. So I think that's important. To educate and empower youth leaders, i.e. coaches, to pass on an important mental health message, destigmatize mental illness diagnoses, normalize the language surrounding mental health and mental illness, and expose the myths around mental health challenges. Have players understand that there's help and support available when it comes to their mental health, and actually that most mental illnesses are treatable. And to give players and athletes the confidence to reach out to a teammate, youth leader, manager, parent, healthcare professional, to open a discussion on their personal mental health. They may, a coach presenting a mental health chat to players may result in the player going somewhere other than you. In fact, quite often it does, but you've opened up that conversation. Next slide. The origins of Buddy Check for Jesse. So in October 29, 2014, as you saw, my son died by suicide. And as one of the coaching staff on both my boys' hockey teams, they were 13 and 10 at the time, Jesse's brothers, I went into the dressing room and had a chat with the players and talked to them about brotherhood and friendship and invisible feelings that people might have. And it wasn't a deep and dark discussion about suicide and so forth. And at the same time, I found out at that time that green was the color of mental health, green represented the color of mental health. And all the players taped their sticks green, and that went on for a few weeks. And it really was a help. People would ask what it's all about, and it just really opened up a discussion. And it was a very supportive environment for my family and for myself, and trying to keep my boys' life normal, going to hockey and seeing their friends and everything else. No clue that I'd be talking about this in May 2021, that's for sure. And the next year came around, and my boys asked me, are we going to do it again? Because they thought it was helpful. And I thought, oh, okay, let's do it again. So I gave it, I adjusted my chat, spoke to the kids in the dressing room, and got our tape out and did all that kind of stuff. And did that again in 2016. And then October 29, 2017, I was in the gym thinking of what I was going to say that day in the dressing room. And that's when all this started. When I had an idea, why am I the only one doing this? Why can't other coaches do it? Why can't other youth leaders do it? Why can't this is pretty important? And I'd already had a fair bit of feedback from at that point in time. So called my wife, and she sort of was like, when do we get started? And so got started, and in, long story short, I ended up with our logo and some support through a CBI Health and a marketing company. Jeremy White was instrumental. And in 2018, 2019, we were able to send out more than 1,500 hockey packages with the support of BC Hockey, team packages with tape and wristbands and bag tags and so forth. And that was just through BC Hockey. Many other teams across the country were doing Buddy Check talks, and the feedback was overwhelming. And part of that was because after the first year, and you'll hear, Lindsay came on board, and the social media started spreading. And we, through parents, coaches, players, associations, and a lot of personal testimonials to me from people, they wanted to see this grow and become multi-sport. And we realized that we were probably onto something, and knew we would be. Obviously, hockey doesn't have exclusive rights to mental health. We knew that we would expand, and part of the benefit, if they're very few, but part of the benefit of COVID was to sort of hold up in sport, and it gave us the opportunity with the support of Be a Sport to rebrand as a multi-sport program. And that's where we are right now, trying to build. And we've had a number of associations now on multi-sport reach out. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Next slide. So why youth? Why target youth? Youth is defined technically age 12 to 24. Majority of mental illness starts before the age of 19. As you've all heard already, stigma is the main barrier to support, diagnosis, treatment. 100% of us will be touched by mental illness in our lifetime. Youth have developing brains, emerging thoughts, beliefs, impressionable, haven't formed rigid opinions yet, like some of us as we get older. And they're the group that obviously are the most flexible, and they could lead to positive change in the future. And we're trying to do this through Buddy Check, changing the mental health conversation through sport. Obviously, there's many routes that are needed, and this is just the area that we're approaching. This is just one way to do it. Next slide. How do you reach youth with a mental health message? There's typically now it's school assemblies, it's parents, healthcare system, religious leaders, but many parents have told me that their kids only listen to their coaches, and sometimes that's not always a great thing, I guess. But so who's better to open up the conversation about mental health than coaches in the position they have to speak to their players, their athletes? So far, we've had well over 2,000 coaches deliver Buddy Check talks over the years. So it's not a hard thing to do. Next slide. Next. So what is the key messaging for Buddy Check? From the player's point of view, they want to know that you care about them. Youth leaders, coaches, the players all want to know that you actually care about them. And this is one way to show that. It's amazing the difference it can make. Obviously, coaches are in a position to make a difference beyond just the skills of the game. And coaches can educate players that mental health challenges can affect anyone. And hey, guys, look out for each other. The messaging is not complicated. It does not have to be complicated. In fact, you don't have to say much to get somebody on board to make a difference. And probably everybody's realized that at some point in their life as well. What may seem like an insurmountable problem, you have a talk, you sleep on it, next few days, things actually aren't as bad as that initial day. And that works in this situation as well. Next slide. The key takeaway that players need to hear from coaches is that anybody can go through mental health struggles, mental illness. You saw the spectrum that Shaunna was showing of all the different mental illnesses and struggles and so forth. It's often invisible. You need to look for signs, but it's often invisible. People don't have a cast on, they don't have a crutch, they haven't had their ACL repaired. They're not talking about going to their therapist, but they certainly love talking about going to their strength and conditioning coach. Get the message. The other message is don't judge, bully, embarrass. Language matters, words matter. You would not want to be judged if you were going through something. In the world we have today, it's a little harsh at times. Nothing wrong with teaching people to be kind and compassionate. Our words do matter. You want to get across the message that mental health challenges are not different than physical challenges, and often they occur together and play off each other. And without a doubt, mental health is equally as important as physical health, and often the difference maker in terms of success from an athletic point of view. And those who seek help for their problems will ultimately do better than those who don't. Next slide. On the left is a depiction of one of our Buddy Check cards that every player gets when their Buddy Check chat is had with the players and athletes. We also give out these wristbands. The reality is it takes 10 or 15 minutes of your time. It's not a big, long, involved thing to actually do it. The build up to it is important. We'll talk about that, but to actually do it, it's really not that complicated. You can go to the Buddy Check website. You can download a couple of coaches' chats that we have on there as samples, and you can just read them. That's what some of my friends have done. They've just read those things, or sometimes you take a bit of time to think about it and infuse some of your own experiences. And it's amazing what a difference that can make. But you don't have to be talking about complicated resources and fancy brain maps and all these kinds of things. That's not what it's about. It's really a simple chat. We can go to the next slide, please. So most important things about the chat that you hope players get, it's that they're going to reach out and use that phrase buddy check. I know that it becomes around my community, it's getting used more and more, buddy check somebody. And my friends and I say just doing a buddy check, like we started using that language. Make sure you get across that something simple to a player, to a teammate, like, how you doing, buddy? Just tap them on the butt, how you doing? It's amazing what a difference that can make. And the best part is it's all coming from the coach. That is the impact, and that impact could last a lifetime. You can go to the next slide, please. So how do you do this? One simple way is you might coach a team. I'm working with a friend of mine right now who coaches a U18 female lacrosse team, and he's basically going to do the talk with all his 23 players and 3 coaches, and he's going to get a few resources, some wristbands, some bag tags, and have a buddy check night, and make sure that the email goes out to all the parents so they know what's happening, making sure that all the girls show up on the Saturday night. Right now they are a lot because they don't have a lot else to do, but making sure that and so a little bit of a buildup, and he's going to just deliver the talk himself with his assistant coaches. One of the things you can do is get the association on board. You basically what we've done with hockey, with BC Hockey, what they've done is basically send out a note to all the different teams. We've targeted different age groups over the different years and saying packages are coming, and here's the message, and make sure that all the coaches do this. And you send the message, you send the information to the manager, who often they're the key person for the coaches, and you get the organization to do to buy into the whole process. The sooner you can send out the information, the better, so people have a time to absorb it and think about it and look at it, and coaches have a chance to maybe think about what they're going to say, rather than getting just overwhelmed immediately and say, oh my God, I'm not a mental health professional, because that's not what this is. And you target a time and a date, especially as an association, where everybody's going to do it. And that's an ideal thing. But again, one-offs happen as well. And there's lots of things we're working on now, which I'll chat briefly about in a little bit. The idea of the green is it amplifies the message. It promotes that everybody's on the same page, that you're all there to support each other, camaraderie. Everybody's working towards a common goal. It's visual. People like swag. I go through so many of these wristbands with my kids' friends and so forth. It's unbelievable. So, and they know what it's for. They don't sit there and talk about mental health all day long, but it's somewhere deep in those brains, those growing brains, that can make a difference in the future. This is something that Lindsay's amazing at, communication, and she's got sample templates on how to reach out to the parents and reach out to associations, how to use social media to amplify the message, how to access the website in the best way, et cetera, et cetera. And we're constantly evolving this. Next slide. Oh, and I was going to say, go back one slide, please. And you don't have to do all this fancy stuff. You can simply go to the website, download resources, and do a chat. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to get all the stuff. The stuff is fun and it helps and it definitely amplifies it, no doubt about it, but all the information is right on the website. Super simple. Next slide. Our current strategy, I've learned over the last few years, it does take some funding to run this. that idea from 2017, the light bulb moment has turned into a little bit complicated stuff in my brain, but that's okay. It's all for the common good. We are hoping to eventually be able to fund small information sessions to associations similar to this, where people can learn even more and just it can have more of an impact when you do deliver a program. The more donations and sponsorships we get, the more we can be able to fund associations for packages, because there's no doubt when you give people a package and it's got a bunch of stuff and it's handed to them, there's more chance there's going to be uptake. That's just tends to be human nature, as we all know. Next slide. We have been partnering with different organizations, Via Sport, Pisces. Recently, the District of North Shore, Vancouver Firefighters Charity partnered with us and have just launched, and they have their firefighters going out to different sport organizations in the North Shore all the way to Whistler, and are getting teams on board. And they actually, on Instagram yesterday, they had pictures of a lacrosse coach doing the chat, and they're so that's been a huge partnership. We're still partnered with BC Hockey. We have a lot of discussions ongoing right now with other organizations and so forth, which I won't bore you with, nor should I probably talk about it right now. And we have a youth ambassador program that we want to get working on, and we have our first youth ambassador who you're going to hear about, and that's Owen. And the bottom line is reach out to us for any information you want, any help. And we'll go to the next slide. And, you know, the most important thing is, despite all this businessy stuff, the message is the key thing. Coach to athletes, simple, look out for each other. That's the key thing. And hopefully this becomes something that can spread. It's something, it's not complicated, and it's one way to access the huge mental health challenge that in sport that Shaunna was talking about. And so I think whether you take a print screenshot of this or you take your phone and take a screenshot of this, everybody should have these numbers in their phone, whether you're a coach or not, and share them, because you never know when somebody might approach you, and this can make a huge difference. Click, click, click. Yeah. And then you can take a picture of this one as well. This is all of our social media and how to access us and how to look things up and find us. You can look through there and see some of the things we've done. Appreciate your time. I'll pass it over to Lindsay.
My turn.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about my favorite subject ever, which is my kid Owen. And I call him our first youth ambassador because that's the program I really want to work on for Buddy Check. But this is my son at age of 10. He's now 12, but at age of 10, he was diagnosed with 4 mental illnesses. He was diagnosed with social anxiety disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder. And because of all of that, he was also diagnosed with depression after years of battling his anxiety. So that was at the age of 10. And Buddy Check has had an incredible impact on our lives. So what you need to know about my sweet boy is that he used to have panic attacks 5 to 7 days a week, and they'd be 2 to 3 hours long. So this is him standing, his team is on the ice there, and this is him. This is almost every single practice, every single game, this would happen to him. 50% of the time he would be able to get on that ice, and 50% of the time he could not get on that ice. And so what I wanted to talk to you guys about is the impact that Buddy Check has had, and then maybe give you guys as coaches or mentors a few tips on how to handle a kid like Owen when you see somebody that's obviously struggling with some mental illness. I would just encourage you to do a few things, and I'm going to talk about a little bit of that. This was his coach, Ian Taylor. If you're in the hockey realm of anything, you may know Ian. He's an incredible coach. In October of 2018, he sat us down in the dressing room, or sat his team down. And because of Owen's illnesses, I often got to be in the dressing room just because he needed his support warrior with him. And Ian started talking about checking in with each other, and that, you know, we can have bad days, and people can have mental illnesses, and people have battles that you can't see that they're fighting. So the best thing that you can do is be supportive and caring and check in on each other. And I remember sitting in that dressing room thinking, holy smokes, this guy's talking about mental illness, like in a dressing room. What is happening? And as he was going through his presentation and his talk, my son, who had not yet been diagnosed at that time, he was diagnosed about 4 months after our talk, but we knew he had anxiety, and Coach Ian was talking about anxiety, and he looked up at me and he said, "Mommy, he's talking about me." And I thought, oh my God, no, you're not being singled out. Like, don't worry. And he's like, "This is awesome." And then I thought, oh, okay. And then Coach Ian started talking about how we can all be safe places for one another, and how the teammates should be safe places for each other. And that if you see somebody having a bad day, be that safe place. And Owen looked up at me and he said, "Mommy, you're my safe place." And I lost it in there at that moment. And that buddy check talk, that moment in our life, is one that I will never forget. And so when we finished that buddy check talk, I reached out to Stu, and it's been ever since, but nothing. Oh, hang on. Sorry, hang on a sec. I'm going to play this video because nobody can tell you more about Owen than Owen.
Experiences at the rink would be.
We'll start again. Here we go.
Before buddy check,
Oh no.
my experiences at the rink would be having panic attacks. My panic attacks look like me crying, and some occasions getting mad and hitting stuff that is not humans, like garbage can and throwing my shoes. When I can't get on the ice, it's frustrating because I really want to do it, but I can, but I won't sometimes because it's just so hard to. Yeah, so it's sad and it's hard. Last year is when I got the buddy check talk, and as soon as we had that talk, everybody got super supportive of anybody who had a bad day, feeling blue, crying, even if it's not a panic attack. People in hockey, their attitudes changed as soon as buddy check, like everybody heard about buddy check, and their attitudes changed big time, and they were super supportive. Before, they really didn't know what it was, so they didn't know how to help, but now they know. As soon as I get on the ice after a panic attack or something like that, it's relieving, it helps me a lot, it makes me feel way better, and I just have fun after that. Who hasn't had a positive impact by Check or Jesse? I think everybody who hears about it is impacted in a positive and happy way, and that's what it happened to me. I can't imagine my life without buddy check, because it helps so many people with hockey. Even if you don't play hockey, just learning about it makes you feel better, because you know there's people who understand what you're going through. Buddy check is 25% of my life. My number one message that I want people to know is that you're not alone. Thank you, Stu, and thank you to everybody at Buddy Check for Jesse.
He's the coolest kid. I mean, seriously. Okay, so since Owen had that buddy check, he was about 4 months after having that buddy check talk, was diagnosed with his illnesses. That gave him the courage and the platform to freely talk about mental illness and mental health. And he will talk about it to anybody. He is so open about it. And I firmly believe that it's because of this talk. I 100% know that it was that moment that allowed him to start talking about what was going on with him. He's taught a lot of coaches on how to coach a youth with mental illness. I'm real proud of that. He also, just a mom brag here, but but I guess it also shows that this message from Buddy Check has given him a platform to talk about everything and to allow others to talk about other things. So a few summers ago, he did a campaign called Pushing for Awareness, where he did 50 push-ups for 50 days. He raised over 5K, in which some of that went to Buddy Check. He's decreased stigma in our own home. So where I used to be terrified to even say the words mental illness, now this is a common conversation in our house. So it's taken any stigma away. And having a kid with mental illness, there's such a tendency to try and hide it or be ashamed of it or be sad or terrified. And that just makes him who he is. And I think that's just, that's all because of a Buddy Check. Owen continues to raise money for Buddy Check, and he's acting as their first ambassador. He created these sweatshirts, or these hoodies. There's two kind of different designs, and all proceeds go to Buddy Check. So it's definitely given him a purpose and a place for him to talk about mental health and mental illness and help other people around him understand what's going on. I just added this slide because I thought, I have a group of you here that might need to know how to handle a kid like Owen. And so we've been so incredibly lucky to have coaches who are willing to listen and willing to be open to deal with things that happen with Owen. So the number one thing that I would say, if you have somebody on your team and you know that they suffer from anxiety or panic attacks or ADHD or anything that you know that they're going through, is to please don't be scared. Don't be scared of the child. Don't be scared of talking about it. Don't be scared to go to the adults or to the guardians or the parents. Just be open about what you're seeing and what you're experiencing and ask how you can help. The second one is to keep communication open. Now, because Owen is such a huge advocate for talking about his mental illnesses, this is real easy for us, but a lot of kids don't have this. So Buddy Check is a great way for you to bring this safe place and this openness to communicate into your team. I would say number 3 is to include the player at all times. Now, when Owen couldn't get on the ice, you see him here, his coach would constantly check on him, come and bop him on the head or come and bang him on the shoulder and tell him that he wishes he could be out there, but it's all right. So, I mean, just keep continuing to include them. I would encourage you to not judge poor behavior. So as Owen was saying, his panic attacks sometimes involved him taking his gloves off and throwing them across the room. That was once everybody had left the dressing room, but it happened all the time. Or he'd kick a garbage can. Now they have no control over how they're behaving in that moment. So just don't judge that behavior. They're not being jerks. They're not trying to do anything. They're not trying to do anything in particular. At that moment, all they're trying to do is survive. When in doubt, ask. If you think there's something going on with one of your players or one of your coaches or one of your co-coaches or anybody, ask. Stop worrying about, coming off as insensitive. It's not insensitive. It's actually being sensitive and asking and being a safe place to talk about these things. And then one of the most important things, I think, when we're working with somebody or youth with mental illness, is to know that there's nothing more than that player wants to be than with you guys out playing. So Owen never wanted to be standing there. Owen never wanted attention. Owen never wanted to have the spotlight on him. All he ever wanted to do was get on the ice. So if you ever question about what a kid's doing and that maybe they don't want to be here, I'll tell you first and foremost, that is not the truth. They 100% want to be there. That is my contact information. I just put that in there in case you wanted to reach out to me. I have lots of information and tips if you want to learn more about Buddy Check and how you can get involved with Buddy Check. I'm there to help you on all social aspects, on all email templates, on all weekends that you organize. I am here 100% to help you guys get organized and find the green on your team. And just as a reminder, this is all for Stu. I work real hard for Buddy Check because I know it's helped our family incredibly on so many platforms. But at the root of it, we're doing this in memory of Jesse, and that's always just something I'd want to end on. And that is our presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to pass it back on over to Shaunna.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. That was amazing, Stu. And Lindsay, I love how Owen actually has calculated the percentage of time that he spent.
I know. But he says it all the time. It's
25%. So it's 25% specifically.
Specifically.
So that was amazing. And thank you so much, Stu. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a more amazing presentation, and it just weaves so seamlessly into everything I feel like I've been trying to do over the last 20 years. It's in some ways a dream come true to have so many amazing grassroots and local, but now very much moving beyond local into outside of hockey, into multi-sport, outside our province, change makers. And if you look at, I showed this slide just before I introduced them. It was a couple slides before. And if you, now that you've been introduced to Buddy Check, you can see how it literally fulfills all of those, key pillars of change making. So it's enhancing that mental health literacy through the practice, through the language, through the visibility, the color green, all those things, the check-in system. Yeah, it's a buddy check, right? Even using that term, just normalizing it, creating, a new cultural norm in your dressing room, in your sport, positive role modeling, figuring out where that help might be, providing that hope, and making those players on that team feel like they're really part of that sport community of care that we were talking about. The change making and that culture shift does start with us. We know also, and Stu talked about this, that there are a certain population, and that includes us in sport, that are less likely to talk about it, right? And boys and men are right up there. So boys and men, athletes, coaches, many other cultures, too many to note here, but the ones that really came through also in your footage were those top two populations. And then thinking about who the key influencers are at different stages in child and human development. So in childhood, starts out with parents and guardians and caregivers and teachers. But by the time they're teenagers, the primary influencers are their peers, the ones sitting next to them with the green tape, right? The coaches. And then as young adults, especially in our sports system, as we move through, coaches are really the ones that stay in that primary influencer role throughout. So when they're exposed early on in childhood through to the teen years and well into adulthood, the coaches remain that stalwart influencer. So that's you, for a lot of you that are on this call today. So role modeling, doing that buddy check, leading to system change within your own team and your own organization, and reducing stigma, whatever that's going to look like for you, is where we can start. I'm now, to wrap things up, we just saw an amazing case study with Owen, like real lived experience for Lindsay and Owen and their family, and how much Buddy Check has changed their lives. So I'm not going to get into too many details on a specific case study, but more talking about the case of maybe the coach or the sport professional being the case study. We have so many coaches that have gone their entire lives struggling, whether it's with symptoms of a mental illness or other mental health challenges. And in so many cases, partly because of our culture and all the things that we've been talking about today, stigma, and take your pick, there's so many to choose from, why they haven't seek the help potentially has gone undetected, or we've used more maladaptive ways to cope with it. And it comes through in a lack of self-compassion for the coach, being able to treat themselves like they would the buddy, right? So being kind to ourselves, knowing that we are not superheroes all the time. We need help too, as the leaders, recognizing our own thresholds for stress, rewriting this narrative that coaches have to be all things to all people, right? Coaches need help too. We need peer support. We need systems that the leadership that's going to be pushing this change, that means we need to look inwards too. So it might mean we might have to step outside our comfort zone and learn more about things like mindfulness or self-acceptance and compassion, so that we can model this for kids like Owen, right? So it might be the kids teaching us to be kinder to ourselves. So that really needs to be normalized as well. So buddy checking each other, coaches checking on coaches, coaches checking on general managers, checking on CEOs, checking on high performance directors and technical leaders, checking on parent volunteers, right? All of us, regardless of our role. We just need to break this down and change the conversations. Do we even check our own batteries? Right? We check our phones constantly, but do we check our own? And could we have more visuals? There are so many tools being developed out there, especially we've seen an explosion in mental health literature and tools and all kinds of really great visuals where we're linking up the creative minds on the artistic side and in the mental health side, joining in the middle, coming up with images like batteries and things that kids can relate to, that youth can relate to. Something like a phone battery, right? Using language, like Stu was saying, doesn't have to be complicated. It's like, you feeling good, feeling great, feeling so, struggling, I'm on empty. So whatever language they want to do, whatever's going to help them relate, we can use those tools. So that some of the building blocks that they went over as well when they were introducing Buddy Check and in my discussions with Via Sport, some simple places to start that aren't going to have to take a ton of time right now, but might definitely take some effort and some pause for reflection. So that self-awareness, changing the language and the practices. So that starts with you, that starts at home, identifying and aware and being more aware in your life and your program. What are the mechanisms that we're currently using to check in? So using language like Buddy Check does, and just doing a buddy check. How you doing? Something as simple as that, the conversation starter. What would that look like? And every sport's going to be a little bit different. And every mental health challenge, or the ones that might perhaps be more prevalent in particular sports, we might want a more individualized or boutique approach, given that there's a preponderance. So for example, I've been contacted, and some of you I recognize are on the call today, eating disorders have skyrocketed in your sport, especially over the last year. So are there things that we can do in the realm of prevention, in the realm of detection and treatment, and then in keeping those young people in recovery, right? What might that look like? Teaching the skills and of coping, communicating, and caring, and how we show those 3 C's. What do those look like? And building our community. So this is where we can do a lot of this stigma reduction and first steps in reaching out and being that support, and some of the prevention pieces and inclusion pieces in-house. But who are some of those out-of-house folks that we might want to start including? What's that screenshot look like that Stu has, that we make sure that it's there for crisis situation? Do we have an emergency action plan that includes a mental health emergency, not just a physical health emergency or a fire or a flood? This is when a kid is in crisis. What does it look like? Do we have that built in to our EAC, our EAP? So to wrap up, it's a huge field, and so we're not going to solve it all today. And I'm excited to report that Via Sport and many other, as are many other provincial and territorial sport agencies, are working on ways that we're going to be building in that mental health strategy in our province, and that will come in the months to come. So we're excited to be part of that with all of you. But for now, maybe thinking about what would be some avenues for training that you could do today. What could we do today? So now you already know about Buddy Check. So that's going to be bookmarked in your browser, right? To check out Buddy Check, start that conversation at home in your program. Like Stu and Lindsay said, doesn't have to be complicated. Think about that positive and quality environment that honors mental health. What's that going to look like? Adding Buddy Check to your lexicon, adding the whole concept and using them as a vehicle potentially to start that culture change that you've been meaning to do for some time, but never really knew where to start. Take clear, easy access, and a lot of them are free training on that awareness. And Stu made reference to it earlier. I alluded to it as well. You've got the Coaching Association of Canada, professional development module on mental health. It takes anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. Who doesn't have 45 minutes to an hour? And not only will you get the training, you'll get a ton of tools in there too. So the emergency action plan is an example. Lots of self-care materials, all kinds of handouts and things that you can do to start the conversation with your athletes as well. And then lastly, and then there are other ones through the Canadian Mental Health Association, things like Safe Talk, mental health first aid, and some things that you might want to build into your coach development pathway, or for those of you that are in leadership, part of that onboarding process with new employees, maybe we want to add, in addition to having first aid and some of these other prerequisites and police checks, we want to make sure we add some mental health awareness in there in our policies, right? So some different administrative culture changes as well. And just get yourself ready. So assess that organizational readiness. Are we in a position now we're really ready to start manifesting and getting this mental health strategy rolled out locally, regionally, provincially? What might that look like? So we're really excited to be able to take this plan and to be able to help you every step of the way as we move in this direction in British Columbia. So all kinds of different tools that we can add to those mental health assets, giving these to coaches so they can embed them into some of their coaching practice. Now I'm just putting this one up here. I've repurposed it from another presentation to give you an idea of some of the toolkits that we're creating that will, so you don't have to create something out of nothing. Some of the stuff is out there already. We just need to get it together in one place so that you can access it and it doesn't have to be hard, and remove the barriers to the provincial, regional, and local sport orgs to start embracing this the way that Buddy Check has done it, removing the barriers, not making it complicated, giving you a place to start. It's green tape, a conversation, and a smile. Really, it's amazing that they could do so much. And now Owen's giving 25% of his life to it. It's the cutest thing. I'm never going to forget that he said that. And so, yeah, so all these other tools, you got tools you could put on your phone. We've got, there's an inventory out there. So it's about us, pulling it together. So this will be coming in the months ahead. And we hope that all of you that are on this call here today will be part of it, because we expect that Buddy Check is going to be one of several that we'll be highlighting in the way of resources and tools and change makers that you can all dip into and include. And you can see the multitude of them on here. And what I'm going to do, Emily, is we're going to compile these and make sure that we've got the hyperlinks, and maybe we could send this out as a PDF to everyone who has signed up, for example, for today's webinar, so that we make sure that everyone gets the opportunity to access these. Or you can always screenshot this if you'd like, but you are going to be getting that as part of the after process of this workshop. So that's, I believe, all that I had as a wrap up. Oh, I guess just I did a raw slide, to do it together, because we really can't, and those of us who work, because I'm lucky because I get to kind of straddle both communities. I've got one foot in the sport community and one foot in the mental health service provider community. So we are so much better when we do it together. And now when we're sort of joining forces, joining hearts, joining heads, making this happen, and doing the takeaways, the 2 instant ones you can do today. So just the awareness building and communication, and start doing that research. How ready are you? And then the future action will be, let's get this stuff going. Let's implement it. Let's do some strategies. Let's share. Let's do this more often so that this isn't a one-off. This becomes part of our culture. This is what sport does, is we take care of each other, right? And we include mental health in that global duty of care that we offer. And that's, Emily, all I had, which gives us a grand total of 4 minutes to take us. So we did a good job. We knew we probably weren't going to have a lot with so many people. It gets really tough to answer all the questions, but it might be, given the time restriction, it might be great to just reiterate that plea that we did at the start. That if anyone has any follow-up questions, we would really love to hear from you. And Buddy Check did the same, reach out to them And this was really the conversation starter over the last hour and a half. And then the next steps is where the rubber hits the road. And that's what's really exciting.
And we will be, on behalf of eSports, sending out a post learning centered lab survey so we can learn how to make these better in the future, or more awesome than this one was. And there it will be contact information as well. So look for a follow-up survey link coming from ViaSport, and then you're always welcome to reach out to us, Shaunna, or Buddy Check for Jesse if you have any further questions for resources, etc.
Awesome. I'll hand it back to you, Emily, right now, if you want to.
Yeah, I'm just looking and monitoring the chat box so far. We've just got a few thank yous, and I haven't seen any additional questions yet. So we'll give it a couple more minutes and let people sign off if they don't have any other questions, and hang on for the next little bit and see if anybody else has questions. I don't think so. Just lots of thanks. Lots of thanks. So,
Excellent.
good learning for everybody, which is good. Cool. Well, I guess we can probably close the meeting. So I will, on behalf of ViaSport, Shaunna, and Buddy Check for Jesse, if I may, say thank you to everybody who came, listened to the conversation, heard the story, and we're really looking forward to elevating this work in the future. So, thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.